Good morning, good afternoon everyone. Thank you very much for coming and supporting us. I've obviously been around motor racing for quite a long time, like 25 years, and I am absolutely genuinely delighted to see more women in this sport. So I know sometimes we think that there's not enough women in the sport, but actually, genuinely, it's a lot better than it was when I first started. So we're on the right way, we've just got to get more. So today we're going to hear from a number of amazing women that have worked in motorsport, support motorsport, or in technology. And we're going to literally explore one question, which is how we as a society can influence the view of ambitious women. There's a great book by an author called Deborah Coden called Ambition is Not a Dirty Word. And she explores 8 ambition rules that women find quite difficult. So we're going to dig deep into those rules. I'm not going to read, I don't need to tell you what they are. You all know what they are. And we're going to start by speaking to Amelia.
Hiya.
So Amelia started this amazing month celebrating women in motor racing. And she's a very ambitious young woman, and we're going to talk a little bit about her journey to where she's got to and some of the thoughts that she's got around ambition and motorsport. Mm-hmm. So Amelia, should we start by, you obviously founded this amazing thing in 2020. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about it and tell me why you set it up.
So I would say I'm new to F1. I fell in love with F1 in 2020. And I was 16 when I came into the sport, so I was quite young and I was naive. But I'd never seen the kind of misogyny and sexism that I saw on social media about F1 ever. I'd never seen it. And I just realised there was still this culture of sexism through social media about F1. And 2020 in F1 was obviously a year of huge social change. And I think there was a lot of culture to change some of the older attitudes that we were seeing. So I created Women in Motorsport Month as an event where we could focus those efforts and push for change, both in celebrating how far we've come and recognising how much we've got to go in the future.
Could summed it up really well. So this year you've decided that the theme is ambition.
Yeah.
So what does ambition mean to you? And when you look to the future, what does that look like?
So when I created the theme ambition, I want that to have 2 parts. I want that to be about our ambition as individuals, for example, young women starting in F1 or in motorsport in general. Where do they want to go? Do they see themselves, in racing, in technology? What do they want to be? But I also see it as our joint ambition for this sport. So many of us believe in a better future for F1 with representation and better safety for women. And I think those 2 feed into each other, and that's what ambition is about for me. So if we can encourage more young women to enter motorsport, then we have a more representative sport that meets our ambitions. But when you have a more representative sport, then more young women are encouraged to join the sport.
And what does ambition mean to you? Where do you sort of see yourself?
So for my personal ambitions, that ties a lot into what I want to see the sport doing. I'm at the moment a writer, and I want to use projects like this as well as writing to further the goal of social change in F1, not just with sexism, but with racism, with the financial equality and the environmental impact of the sport. I want to be someone that changes the sport and the way that we look at it. I have such huge ambitions for what I believe the sport can be, and my ambition for myself is to be someone that drives that through social media, through projects like this, and through writing.
Amelia, thank you so much. Thanks for your vision. That's amazing. And we all wish you all the best, and hopefully come back next year and we'll see what your subject and what your focus is then. So thanks very much. Thank you. So let's move on to the panel discussion. I'd like to invite 4 amazing women when we're going to discuss ambition and these rules around ambition for women. So I'd like to invite Claire first. She is the Aston Martin Aramco Cognizant F1 Team's Chief Information Officer. I'd like to invite Linda, who's from Cognizant. She's a Senior Director and heads up travel and hospitality for Europe. And I'd like to invite Sid, who is our business partner for production from IT, and Jess Hawkins, who's our driver ambassador for the team. Welcome, everybody. So Claire, So Claire, thanks for joining us today. Can you give us a quick overview of your career to date and your journey in working in motor racing?
Sure. So career to date, very early on I decided I wanted to combine my passion for travel with what I did for a living. So I decided I didn't want to go down to sort of interpreting, translating. So I decided I'd combine languages with business, and that's given me a great platform to travel, which has been, and also experience all sorts of different ways of working, which has been very beneficial to draw on in professional life. I like changing industry. The majority of times I move, it keeps you fresh, keeps you learning, keeps you having an open mind. So I've worked in everything from e-commerce to financial services, leisure, etc. And I have previously worked for a different team in motorsport. I found that really exciting, as I would say my personal style is fairly dynamic, fairly fast, which really matches Formula One. So I've worked in IT in different guises, and I was delighted to find an opportunity here to come and get back to some fast-paced change.
Excellent stuff. And Linda, thanks again to you for joining us today as well. I know that you've spent quite a lot of your career working in the airline industry, which I think is pretty male-dominated, very like motorsport. You talk about ambition for women to become leaders. How do you harness this and make sure that it grows and women succeed?
Thank you for inviting me, and I share Claire's love of travel, which is probably one of the reasons that I got into the job that I got into. I've been in aviation for the last 25 years, and I have to be honest, when I first joined, I didn't realise I was the only woman. I was fixated on the fact I was the youngest. I'd just moved down from Liverpool to London, and I had the oddest accent. And so I felt self-conscious about many other things, but being a woman was not one of them, ever. Luckily, within an airline, there are plenty of cabin crew around, and the majority of cabin crew, or certainly a lot of the cabin crew, are female. So there was always lots of females around, except until I went into, management meetings or budget meetings or whatever I went into, where I did find myself being the only woman. And I have to say, I never worried about it. I was always absolutely focused on what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't realise I was ambitious. I would never have called myself ambitious, but I knew that I wanted to get to the top. I knew I wanted to be successful. I knew I was better than half the people I was working with. And I went for it, and I was really lucky that I had very supportive managers along the way, both male and female, who knew that I was bringing a different viewpoint, who knew that I was bringing something to help with change, and that carried on. So I can honestly say I've never felt that I'm a woman in a man's world, even though quite obviously I have been. What I now find disappointing is that 25 years on, it hasn't changed. And that's the bit that really I can't understand. And now I'm in the technology industry. I'm working with travel, I'm still working with airlines. And yet I still find myself in most of the meetings I go to, the only woman at the table. And I can't understand, after 25 years, why that hasn't changed. Yeah. I'm really interested about the word ambition and why. What is it that's stopping us getting there?
Yeah. So you've come from outside the industry into motorsport. So you've kind of had those experiences of working in our amazing sport, but also in the wider technology industry. So give us a bit of a sort of career pit stop, if you like, of how you got to.
Sure. So I've been a big F1 fan since I was probably the age of 14. And that's quite weird for a 14-year-old girl. They're not usually into Formula One, but I was a big geek about it. But I didn't want to be an engineer. I was a scientist, so I didn't think I could ever get a career in Formula One. So I carried on with my science, got my master's in geology at university. But when I came out of university, the industry crashed, the oil industry, where I would get a job. So I was a bit lost, and I ended up in IT. So again, IT is quite a male male-dominated sector, especially in the software company I worked for, because we worked in manufacturing. So again, manufacturing is a male-dominated industry, so I was one of the only females consulting in manufacturing. And I'd drive up and down the country in my BMW, going into these rooms with usually middle-aged men, going in there basically going, you're doing your job not very well, you need a piece of software to become more efficient. So I had to grow up pretty quickly, and it was quite eye-opening to go into those conversations, and men were all like this, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So I raised through the ranks in the software company, and just as I was about to be made one of the youngest senior consultants, I jumped and I ended up here at Aston Martin. So it was awesome, dream come true, because again, I said I'd never knew how I was going to get into the industry because I didn't have an engineering background or anything like that, but I've managed to make that jump and realise my dreams. And now with Claire on board, I've had all these opportunities in the past 4 months. I've gone to Miami to talk about the software that I've used, but also been managed to go trackside as well. So it's been awesome in the past 2 years. So I've been here for 2 years now and absolutely loved it.
Well, I'm going to stick with you here for a second. That is pretty impressive. So what's been your main driver and your main influence?
This is going to sound really cliche, but my mum. So my mum's a career woman, so I was brought up with the idea that she would go out to work, she was ambitious, she was going through the ranks in her own career. So it was great to have a mum as a role model to do that. And it's really important, I think, for girls to see that women can rise through the ranks and get a great career, but also be mums and have a life outside of work. So that was a really big influence on me. And what she also provided me was the toolkit to be ambitious myself. So we can all ring our mums and go, oh, I had a rubbish day at work, I don't know what to do, or I want to get a pay rise, or I want to go for this job, but I don't know how to talk to my boss about it. And because of the way she's been through the ranks, she was allowed me and gave me the toolkit in terms of, right, if you want to have a difficult conversation, you need to start with this point, then this point, and then if you then come out, this is the outcome you want, and you explain that to your boss, then that's what you're going to do. So she was able to give me a toolkit so I could have those difficult conversations, which I think is really important for women to have. So I think I'm lucky to have my mum, but I think we all need to group together and offer that to each other, because we're all going through the same things, and I think as women, don't like to verbalise that we're struggling or we don't know how to have a conversation. So I think going forward, that's something I'd really like to be involved with, is giving my toolkit to the next generation of women in Formula
I'll
1.
hold you to that. Jess, obviously you're definitely in a male-dominated part of the industry. Give us a bit of a highlights of how you've ended up here with us at Aston Martin.
That's a good question. I still pinch myself, really. I started racing when I was 8. I'm actually sure you've probably heard this story a million times, so I'm sorry if I've boring you to death. Started when I was 8. I was always sporty rather than academic. That was never a forte of mine, but just anything sports, anything running around or something like that. And I used to play football, actually, up until I was about 10 or something like that. Saw a kart track in the distance when I was with my dad, because my parents were separated from him since I can remember. So it was always normal to go and spend every other weekend with him. And we were playing golf one day, which wasn't a particular favourite of mine, but he enjoyed it a lot. And in the distance was a kart track, and I had no idea what it was. I mean, I knew what it looked like, but I didn't really have any idea what it was. Asked him to let me have a go. He was not keen on taking me over there for multiple reasons, I'm sure. But luckily for him, when we got there, the height restriction was too small, or I was too small for the height restriction. But it must have just stuck in my brain, and I kept on at him, can we go back, see if I've grown, I didn't grow much, I was a very late grower. And he, unlucky for him, they called him when they got some smaller karts in, and I had my first go and I just fell in love with it. I'm not sure what I fell in love with, maybe the speed, adrenaline, anything like that, the competitiveness. And that was it, really. It was never supposed to be a career. It was never supposed to be anything more than something I loved to go and do with my dad a few weekends a year. But we did the championship, won the championship in the first year. And really, I think that I didn't know this at the time, but my dad had actually, in his mid-20s, he'd done some racing himself, but he only did it for about 2 years. And he had to stop because he ran out of funding. And I think that's why he was so sure that he didn't want me to do it, because he didn't want me to go through the same disappointment that he went through when he had to stop. But I don't think either of us ever thought that I would still be here 20 years later, still on that path, still following the dream that I want, following the success that I want. And yeah, signed with the team 2 years ago, which my dad is still mind blown about. He still can't quite believe it, but yeah, I still got a long way to go. I'm not where I want to be yet. And I'll keep going until I get there.
Great ambition, that's what we like to see. Claire, when we chatted before this session, you made a really valid point that recruitment doesn't have gender. And I guess from that point, do you think ambition looks different for men and women?
I think ambition is very personal to each individual, so that's really quite hard to generalise. I think the most important thing is your own level of drive, and that can change throughout your life depending on circumstances, etc. And I think that's what really pushes you and motivates you. I think if you want to have a game plan, that's great. Personally speaking, when people ask me, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? I cringe, because I know I'm the person, if I say I'm going to do something, I will go forward and do it. But actually that, where do you want to be in 5 years' time, I find as a constraint, because I like to keep an open mind. It's like, there may be an opportunity in this direction, and that's perfectly fine to take it. But I've just got to, I'm the person, I'm a bit of that starter finisher. If you're going to do this thing, then you will see it through. So from that perspective, yeah, ambition I think looks different for everybody.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Linda, obviously you're an amazing leader in an amazing business, Cognizant. What sort of tips and resources would you give maybe the younger women that might be listening to us today to become leaders? And what helped you become that leader? Did you have a mentor? Are there people that inspire you? Or maybe it's just something very different?
I think I would give this advice to men and women, actually. So I'm not going to discriminate. But I think women maybe need to hear it a little bit louder than men. I think you have to manage your own PR. Don't assume that even though you're knocking out a fantastic project, you've done a great sale, you've done an amazing piece of work, don't assume you will be noticed. And it's not because people are ignoring you, it's just that everybody's busy, and they haven't noticed. And I think you should, in some way, not brag, because none of us feel comfortable doing that, but find a way of putting your hand up and saying, look at this piece of work I've done. Now that could be, I'll give you, and I give this advice to people, you know, if you've got a monthly team meeting, ask your manager if you can just have 10 minutes on the agenda because you'd like to update the rest of the department on something that you've delivered or something that you've done. So I would say, don't assume you'll be spotted, is the first thing. Second thing is be visible. You know, and again, a perfect example in the aviation industry, and I'm sure it's the same in motorsport, there are hundreds of conferences a year. And I've been going to these conferences for the last 25 years. And although I'm happy to say there's more females attending the conferences these days, generally the majority of the experts on the stage are still men. And I don't believe that there aren't as many experts that are female in the industry. So the question is, where are they and why aren't they on that stage? And I won't say why, because I don't know the answer. But I think, again, as women, we should, even if it's out of our comfort zone, push ourselves forward, volunteer to go on those panels, tell the conference organisers, get onto their speed dial and say, I want to come and do that, even though you might want to die on the first one you do. Do you know what? We've got to change the industry to show that the experts are not all men, that there's just as many experts out there that are women, and I think that will help. And then I've got loads of other tips that I give people, but I won't go through them all. I'll be here all day. But I think very quickly, if you want to go for the next role, if you want to go for your next position, don't wait until you think you can tick all the boxes on what's on the job description, because if you can tick all the boxes, you'll be bored on day 2. So when you can just achieve about 60% of what you think they're looking for, go for it. Go for it and be brave, and go for it and be confident, because actually you need to learn. You've got to stretch yourself, otherwise you will be bored. And you know, so as soon as you think, yeah, do you know what, I can probably do 60-70% of that role, apply for it.
I think this is really relevant as we're currently running recruitment campaigns in IT, and we've had the first round of applicants. There was 140 applicants. They were all male. So we've been actually holding a mirror up to ourselves and saying, okay, so what is it about the job description that's not attracting females? And to your very point, I think the stat is at a minimum of, if a female doesn't believe that they can match 80% of what's on that job description, then they just won't apply. Where men are perhaps a little bit more blasé and it's like, yeah, we'll give it a whirl. You know, and we have to take responsibility for that. We don't, you know, blind screening is one thing, but I'd love to do that. But the fact is, no females apply. So this is something I've been asking for your assistance on, to actually double check, you know, it's not about dumbing it down, it's actually just rewording it. So, you know, people do not get put off if they haven't got every single, you know, in an IT case, you know, bit of experience of software, etc. And I think to build on your comment about, you know, having confidence and just get out there, my tip would be, it costs nothing to ask the question. You know, if you want to go and support Jess, or you want some time in the garage, offer something. Can you go and help? You know, free of charge, or you'll give up your time. But the network and the experience in terms of learning that you will get, I can't stress enough. It costs nothing to ask the question. It's, you know, someone says no, you've lost nothing. But just one day you'll get a yes, and that could be absolutely life-changing.
So confidence is a big thing, right? I mean, you've got to have the confidence to take yourself out of that safety zone. Sid, we talked about confidence quite a bit, didn't we, when we had our little chat. Do you think that's an important factor in ambition?
Hugely. It's so important, and I think the more confident I've become as a working female, the more ambition I have to continue that. So when I started at 22, as I said, I was travelling up and down the country, and the biggest thing for me was to sit in a hotel restaurant and eat by myself. And I got really freaked out by it. I wouldn't go, I would just not eat. And then over a year, I got over that fear, and I was down there in the restaurant, and to Claire and Linda's point, networking with other consultants. So then I was building that network up. But then also within my role itself, I had a great boss, male, that would push my boundaries, but never ever put me in a point of weakness. So I was always growing and being more confident and growing in confidence, which meant I had more ambition to try more and push my boundaries more. So that's really important to have bosses like Claire, who's doing that to me now, is pushing my boundaries, but never ever putting me in a point of weakness that I could fail. And that's why I ended up with the job here. I got so much self-confidence working in the software company. I was able to put myself out there to the team and say, I wanted to work here, what could we do? And we made something work, and it was amazing to come here and realise my dream. And I wouldn't have done that at 22 because I had no confidence. And so it's about having confidence so you can drive to have that ambition.
So did you apply for a specific job here, or did you just send your CV in?
I just sent my CV in and
brilliant,
said,
yeah.
I want to work here.
Women wouldn't normally do that, I feel.
But it was my dream.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I got to the point I had that confidence that I just went, you know what, I'm just going to try it and go, here's my CV.
Fantastic, yeah.
So confidence builds ambition, ambition builds confidence. Jess, you are working in a very competitive arena. I've worked with a few drivers in my time, and I think the thing that always sparks me is that they just never give up. They've always got that ambition that they really want to win. So what advice can you give us about that incredible drive that no matter what, you're going to win?
Yeah, I guess 20 years later, as I said, I'm still here and I'm still fighting for what my dreams. But I think it's very also acceptable, and I think that's something that I've realised, especially over the last couple of years, that I get down a lot of the times, and I often question myself, why am I doing this? Because sometimes the hard work that goes in sometimes doesn't appear to reward straight away. So I have days, and I used to go through periods where I was just really sad. I couldn't, I struggled to get up to do anything to keep fighting. But now sometimes, and I still get like that sometimes, but I don't feel guilty about feeling like that sometimes if I need a day or two or even a week sometimes to just be sad. then I let that in and I accept that. But then something always happens, whether I'm 1 or 2 days in or 3 days, that goes, there comes a point where you forget all that and you just go again. Literally dust yourself down and go again. So I think what's important for me is that if things aren't particularly going your way, you allow yourself that time to kind of recover and recoup and find your love for it again. And I think it really comes down to, I absolutely love what I do. I would not change it for the world, but what's really important is that you just keep going. Things will be thrown at you left, right and centre. You'll get good times, and really the good times completely outweigh the bad times, and they do come as long as you just keep fighting and keep working so hard for what you want to achieve. But I also sometimes feel, this is a strange one saying it, but I often kind of set myself a goal, as something that I want to race in or something I want to do in my life, and I work really hard to get there. But do you ever feel that sometimes when you get there, this isn't what I thought it was 100% going to be? So then you set yourself another goal and you go and do that and achieve that, and you're again always looking for something bigger and better, which I think says a lot for ambition, goal setting. So it's really the experiences that I'm after rather than the offset of achieving it on the way. That period of achieving it is so special, I think, because once you're there, you're like, oh, well, this is boring. What's next? So yeah, going back to the question, it's, I think, important to give yourself sometimes just a little bit of time to be sad, I guess.
And enjoy the ride, right?
And enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the journey
Definitely.
to ambition.
When I read the title of this session and about the lady who'd written the book about ambition being perhaps a dirty word for women, and if you'd have asked me 3 weeks ago, are you ambitious? And bearing in mind I've got to where I've got to, my answer is absolutely, definitely not. I've never been ambitious in my life. And I've got negative connotations with the word ambition, I have to say. Maybe I watched too many movies in the 90s. But what I did, ready for today, is I sent about 25, 26 of my ex-colleagues, and I just sent, sort of, hey, I'm still alive, by the way. Haven't spoken to you for years. Just want to ask you a question. Do you think I am or have ever been ambitious? Yes or no? And I got about a 60% response rate, which I don't know whether that's good or bad. I also put Happy Christmas at the bottom, so that made some people come back to me. Every single man came back and said yes. Yes, obviously. Yes, absolutely. Yes, you are. A couple of the women came back and said yes, but most of the women came back and said yes, but in a nice way. Yes, but you're really kind as well. Yes, but not at the expense of everything. And I thought, or yes, well, you are. Yes, I think you are, but what's the problem? What's the matter? Do you want... And I thought, doesn't that just sum it up? And then I realised that I've been guilty of that too. And if you'd say to me, what's ambition to me, or don't use the word ambition, I've always wanted to be successful. I've always wanted to get on, whatever get on means. And I've always been wanting to learn and keep learning, and there's so much I still want to learn. But actually maybe now's the time for me to say, yes, I have been ambitious. All my life I've been ambitious. There you go. I've said it.
Good.
And it wasn't that hard.
And Claire, do you think your experiences of working abroad have sort of given you confidence, driven your ambition? You've obviously experienced different cultures, worked with different types of people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's really, even if just around Europe, the approach or the attitude of women in the workplace is so varied, and I'm sure you must have seen this, the amount of travel you've done too. I did some placements as part of my university, and again, the fact that in some countries, depending on when the university finishes, certainly by English standards, you'd be quite young to be out there and doing a fairly professional role. And I uncovered some jiggery-pokery with some finances and trying to actually get some seniors to take me seriously, despite having a very credible business case and having plenty of evidence. The fact that, yes, I was female and fairly young compared to their standards and expectations was a real eye-opener. But then I've worked in the Nordics and lived out there, and they have a fantastic concept of, engaging. We were talking before about sort of mums and other people who've perhaps not been in work, or specifically females who stepped out of the workplace for a few years, to get them re-engaged. And the fact that you can share paternity leave, some of these concepts are now filtering into us.
Right?
Yeah. But it's it's very, very noticeable. And the help that the government gives to families specifically. So if you're a young mum, I think for the first 2 years, you can claim money for a cleaner and things like that. And for those of you who have got young families, you'll take any help you get, because quite frankly, either looking after yourself or making you feel okay when you've got other people, or you might be a carer as well, And I think lockdown has taught us something about this. I think we've now got an insight onto probably colleagues' worlds as well. There's had to be a lot of childcare juggling and things like that, and I think people are now a bit more comfortable in saying, I'm just going to do the drop off or do something and I'll be back online in half an hour, and people are much more tolerant of that. So yes, I think seeing how it can work has been quite inspirational to bring some of those values and concepts back.
Excellent.
Yeah, sorry, can I just pick up on that point? Because I think you're absolutely spot on, because I've got a son who's 17 now, so I can't call him a child anymore. But all of from when he was about 6, I've been travelling 3 days a week, all over Europe. And I'm lucky enough that there was a support. My husband was fantastic, and he was able to do his very fair share. And with after school clubs and nurseries and etc., we did all of that. But still, I would feel, if it was the nativity play, or if it was something, I was sort of block the diary, hope nobody asks me what it's going to be about. And I think you're right, in lockdown, because I've noticed so many more men now, and they don't have any problem saying it, by the way. Oh, no, I can't make that meeting, I've got to take my child to the nursery. Okay, that's great. But I never saw women being as bold as that before. And even 2 weeks ago, I've been trying to chase a prospect for quite a while, and I finally got a meeting in the diary. And one of the colleagues that I'm going with said, I can't go because it's my child's nativity play. And I thought, oh my God. And I sent the email to this company, and I just said, look, I'm so sorry. And I thought, I'm going to be honest. And I said, we can't come because it clashes with a nativity play. And this guy wrote back and he said, no problem at all. We'll get together in January. Actually, my son was Joseph. And we've got this whole thing going on now about the nativity play, because I think you're absolutely spot on.
It's real, isn't it?
It's real.
And everybody has it. And I don't think we should hide it. So my calendar is open. Okay, so forget this whole, I'm just busy. It's open. So if I'm on school pickup on the days I can make it, that's what it says. It's half an hour. So if you need me, we've all got one of those. It's that urgent. And I think that's really helping address a bit more of a work-life balance, and not trying to do both 100%. Something's got to give, and as we know, well-being is one of those factors.
Yeah. Well,
so
we're not having to sort of go around in the shadows to try and do balance
it doesn't
everything.
have to be in the grey. I completely agree.
Yeah. And that's confidence as well.
Yeah.
Right?
And also support from your colleagues and the employer as well, that recognises that.
Yeah. Sid, these rules of ambition, which one?
So I have 2. I have one that I'm really good at and one that I'm not so good at. So I would say being brave and handling confrontation and difficult conversations is something I've become really good at, not just because it's my job role, but also asking for more in terms of my career, even at the software company and here. I've not been afraid to do that, and I think that's because my mum gave me that tool set. The one I'm really bad at is taking credit and deflecting from that. I'll be the first to make a joke about myself or embarrass myself. And I think as my career now grows and I want to take that step forward, I've got to take ownership of it, and I've got to take ownership of my wins, because if I don't do that, I'm just going to be passed over for any further promotions. So that's what you said, Linda, resonated a lot. So yeah.
Cool. Mike, before we close up and get some questions from these amazing people that are in our audience, I'm going to ask you all the same question. And that really is, what does success and ambition look like for you guys? So Jess, do you want to start?
Success for me is obviously racing at the highest profession that I can in my career, but it is also enjoying the journey, because it's a long period of time, and I can look back in 20 years and think, oh my God, the journey was amazing. But also to not, obviously I have goals, but I've learned along the way that things pop up, and as you sent your CV, and so your career went that way. I've had some weird and wonderful opportunities in my career, so I'm very open to things that aren't specifically on what I think my route should be. I'm very open to ideas to potentially follow different routes. So success to me will be looking back in 20 years' time, no matter where that is, where I end up, thinking I enjoyed my journey. That is success, and I'm racing in things that I've always wanted to race in.
And you're happy?
I think that happiness speaks for a lot, really, over anything. So for instance, I didn't actually know I was going for a job, but I went for a job once that was my first ever stunt job, which I was dubious about taking because I was very much on the racing route. I was leading the championship that I was racing in at the moment, but I didn't have the money to continue the rest of the season. Everybody was telling me, don't take this job, don't take the job, don't take the job. Or all of my close-knit people around me, because they were like, oh, you're just about to break the racing world. But something inside of me was telling me to just take it. So I took it. And it turned out to be one of the most amazing things that I've ever done. Opened up a whole new world and career that I didn't even know about, that I'm now using alongside my racing. I was lucky to then go back to racing. So I think gut instinct speaks for a lot. You can go on past experiences and follow your gut. And so far, maybe every decision that I've made hasn't been correct, but I've certainly enjoyed the way of getting there, navigating my way.
Excellent. Sid?
I'm still figuring it out. So I managed to go trackside this year for a month and support the race team, and that's my 14-year-old career goal tick. And so I came back. But not many 28-year-olds can say they've achieved their dream as from a 14-year-old girl. So I came back and I sort of looked there and went, what now? And I lost my drive for about 8 months. And I was floundering, I didn't know what to do next, I was unhappy here at work. That's where Claire came in. Claire joined recently, and she's been really dedicated, and it says a lot, and I can't say enough about talent management. She sat me down and she said, what do you want to do next? And I said, I don't know, but what do you want? And it reignited a fire within me in terms of pushing myself, and Claire's been great at pushing my boundaries but not putting me in a place of weakness. So I got to go to Miami. So I'm really excited short term about what I can do here in the IT department. And I think long term, success to me is being happy, like Jess said. And 2 years ago, I would have said I would have to have my career done in the next 2 or 3 years before I went off and got into my 30s and had a family. But I think society's changing to that, and I think with good workplace practice in terms of maternity leave, working from home, flexibility, if we can bring that in, I can see that my career can grow and grow and grow and grow. So it's given me that ambition back to keep pushing and trying to get up into that sea level that Claire has done and proven that she can break the glass ceiling. Having those role models and seeing people do it, if we get more women up there, the more women are going to get up there as well. I think we've just got to keep pushing and keep bringing more women up.
And role models are so important.
They are.
We all need them.
If
Definitely.
we can see someone like you who's up there doing it, why can't you?
Exactly. I totally agree with you. Linda?
Well, just before I go into mine, actually what I'd like to say to you, because it's partly what maybe me and lots of women worry about, is if we are working non-stop, what do our children feel about that? And the fact that your mum was your role model, honestly, and she was a career woman, is music to my ears. And I'm now at the stage where my 17-year-old son says to me that I'm his role model as well, that he sees that women that go out there and have careers. So hopefully that will, when, whatever he does when he's older, whether, he's with a woman married or whether he's got a daughter or whatever, he will see that, it's absolutely normal and fine for the female in your life to be out there working. So that was really nice to hear. So thank you for that. In terms of my own success, what I love to do is join the dots. I think on my CV now, I will just put I join the dots, and that's it. I love bringing in all of the experience I've had. I'm a qualified accountant, that's how I started life. I'm as far away from finance now as you can imagine, but all the way along I've picked up skills. I'm still truly passionate about change and about change for good and about joining the dots. And I love going into organisations, and believe it or not, that the problems are so simple. I shouldn't say that, but they are so simple, which is generally everybody in that room, or if there's a problem, everybody in this room has probably got the answer to it. And if you were to just get together and talk about it, you've got the answer. And all I do is I come in and I go, do you know what, I was talking to them and they've got this great idea, and then I was talking to them and they've got this great idea, and I think if we bring some of the thought process that I've got, we put it all together, we've got the answer. And that's, and I love it when yeah, absolutely. So building a solution that works for people and that people get excited about in an industry that I'm massively still passionate about, that's success for me, and that brings happiness. And just, sorry, one of your other points as well, I did exactly like you when I was very, very, very young, younger than when you started, I think. I was an auditor in finance, and I was having to go all around the country, and I'd find myself in these big hotels, sitting on my own, feeling really
Uncomfortable, right?
Very uncomfortable. I'd be in the restaurant with a book. Now, and over the past few years, I've loved those moments of being in a hotel on my own, having a meal on my own, and not having to get up and make the breakfast. So, slight changes, but yeah.
Claire?
I think success to me, sort of drawing on some of the comments of the other ladies, is about fulfilment. And that comes with it, the happiness factor, from a work perspective, it's whether you've actually sent somebody away happy, you've fixed a really challenging problem at an enterprise level, or something on the personal side. So success to me is about feeling fulfilled. And I think in terms of ambition, like I said, I've got some of the connotations, maybe it's a generation thing about ambition, what it means. But yeah, I think to me that equates to drive, and I've got bags of it.
Yeah, drive is massive. I think if we've all got drive and we've got confidence and we're happy, then life's done, right? Yeah. We're there. Has anyone got any questions for the panel? Come on, there must be some questions out there. No? Oh, there's one lady up there. Ah, Ellie.
I just want to know, how best do you think we can get women or more women into this industry? Does it start from school level? Do we support in that aspect, or funds through university? I mean, how best do you think we can improve that?
I mean, I know the driving bit, I don't know the other bits too well, but
As far as the driving goes and getting more females in to driving, I think that W Series has been a massive driving force for that. Lots of other things, the new Formula One thing, I think giving a platform, and this probably goes to other areas as well, giving women a platform in motorsport that is viewable to the younger generation will certainly get more into it at grassroots level, because I don't think that we're really going to start to see females in Formula One be a regular thing until the younger generation starts feeding through. I think that obviously as drivers there are only a very few of us compared to the ratio of men, and men fall out of that pyramid on the way as well as women. At the moment we just have very few filtering enough. By law of averages, we're not going to have a woman in Formula One. But if we can address the issue at grassroots level, then we'll start to see more feed through, and yes, some will still drop out along the way, but we're going to end up with far more at the peak of motorsport to choose from, or not to choose from, but then, that will then have to prove their worth, prove that they're able to do what's needed of them. But I think at the moment there's so few of us that is the likelihood of it happening, is just almost impossible compared to the amount of men, which probably goes for you guys. It needs a platform for the younger generation to see, because I still don't think, are women in motorsport viewed, would a younger me or a younger you look in Formula One and think that they could be there? I'm not sure that they could. I think that we're a lot further forward than what we were when I first started, but I still don't think that we're there yet.
I didn't think so. That's why I carried on with my science degree. I wanted to be in Formula One. That was my dream at 14. Didn't think I could do it. From my point of view, you've got two ends that I think you need to fix. I think you need to get more women in at the beginning, so more STEM education in schools. My degree was science. I was like 12 out of 80 females on my course, and that's because there wasn't enough science encouragement for females in school. But then also that next stage in our 30s when we, as females, we go and be mums and we go have children, and not having support to get females back into work means that we don't get the career growth that men do, and we don't get to see as many women in C-level jobs. So I think you need to do the education piece at the beginning, but you also need to have policies in place for females coming back to work, like the flexible work and the work from home and all that sort of stuff. So
doing more of this, right? Celebrating women in motorsport.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, this month that Amelia has, put together is a prime example, because we wouldn't be all sitting here having this conversation if it wasn't for the fact that, somebody's gone out there and set this up.
And in Austin this year, I went to a school with Cognizant. They'd set up all about STEM subjects, and they spoke to myself. I went there and an engineer, and they absolutely blew me away. The kids, they were amazing, absolutely amazing. And I think that, we go to lots of Formula One circuits over the year, and if leaving a positive influence, I think is really important. So that was amazing to do. And honestly, these kids were amazing. Very, very, very clever, very intuitive. And they were doing these things with robot balls that really exceed my knowledge of robot balls as well. And they were coding and things like that. And it was incredible. So I think that we are really now starting to see a change for the younger generation, which is, to me, the most important thing.
Yeah. Any more to add on that? No? Any other questions? Yeah.
Has level of education affected yourselves or anything to that degree as to where you've got to in your careers, or do you think it's not necessary these days, or access to training courses as a female, has it been not, like, you're not allowed to do it, or you've not been sort of pushed in that direction? Has that had any effect on where you've got at all? Or?
So speaking personally, comprehensive educated, never done a computer science degree in my life, and I'm a CIO. I think training these days is much more all online, so that whole concept of gender doesn't come into it. And quite frankly, the number of free courses that in the IT industry, like Microsoft, they all want to get you hooked on their products, right? So, you go, there are so many different ways that you can get into it. Go to a trade show, they give you access, they'll give you trialware, give you devices. So again, it's about how bad do you want to make it happen. Volunteering, for, in a weekend, doing a shift in an operations floor. I don't think that's a constraint in the slightest. And education, no. I think there's been enough publication. You could say The Apprentice, Alan Sugar, all the rest of it, that shows that now if you can do the job, skills are more valuable than what's on a piece of paper. Because skills you can learn, it's about your attitude and your behaviours. That's the first thing that I recruit for.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Oh, I've got a geology degree and I don't use it, and I'm in IT, so comprehensive educated as well. But you've just got to, like Claire said, you've just got to have the skills and be proud of yourself and own your.
And Linda, what about in the sort of more technology-led in Cognizant? Do you see young people coming through that are not necessarily been to university or got first-class honours degrees from the best universities in the country?
I think there's a real shortage in the technology industry anyway, and so the industry as a whole is looking at different ways of attracting people in, whether it be through university, whether it be straight from A-levels. I think Google have their own pathway in if you want to go and work there. So things are changing. I mean, we're in Cognizant very, very focused on the amount of training that you do. We all have a KPI that we have to do 8 hours a quarter. And we've got a huge access to any sort, and that's any training, by the way. So if I want to go off and do some coding, which I would never do, by the way, but if I did want to go off and do that, I could do that for my 8 hours. And I think it just goes back to what I said at the beginning. You've got to want to keep learning. I mean, I've been in the industry a long time, and I still want to learn. There's so much stuff out there that, I was joking. I don't know anything about Formula One, but I've started watching the Netflix series, And suddenly I'm all over it, because it's different things I've never heard of. I mean, you'll know where I am because Sebastian Vettel is still with Ferrari, so I'm not quite there yet. But I'm watching it and I'm absolutely loving it, because it's opened this whole thing. Oh my God. And I can see some similarities from things that I've done in different industries, in aviation, you know, sort of the pit stops, a lot quicker, but very similar to turning an aircraft around. You know, sort of you come in, you get all the passengers off, you clean it, you get all the catering back on. Because you want your assets to be moving as quickly as possible. You know, when they're on the ground, they're not making you any money. So, you know, there are so many similarities, and I still want to learn. And I guess the day that I don't want to learn, well, they'll put me in a box. But, you know, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Any more? Oh.
Okay. You talked a lot about confidence and whether it plays a role and to what degree. If there is a balance, what do you think the balance would be in terms of confidence that comes from within, so your own self-belief, to the confidence you get from others, so your management, to praise or through the, I guess, compliments and achievements you've made or something like that? What has the balance been for you in your careers?
I can give you my view on that, which is, I think a lot of confidence comes from within. And I think it's cemented by, you know, your own successes. So even if they're not, even if you're not publicly rewarded, you know yourself that you've done a good job. You know that your capabilities are growing. You've got experience that's wider, not necessarily just about work. You're getting life experience. So I think there is a lot of confidence from within. But also, we all like to be told we've done a good job. You know, we all like somebody to say, you know, and here's Linda, and she's just done this fantastic project, and isn't it amazing? And oh, yeah, it is. It's just, because I won't go and say, look, I've just, like I said at the beginning, we all need to get better at that. So I think confidence is two ways, but my view is if you stay true to where you're trying to get to, and you know you've got the capability, and I was going to swear, but don't make it up. You know, if you've got a gap in your knowledge, go and close that gap. Don't just pretend that you know, go and close it. You don't have to tell anybody you're closing it, just go and close it. And the more you do that, the more confidence you will get. The more successes you have, the more people will start to listen to you anyway. And I think as long as you've got a supportive team around you and a great network, because then you've got lots of other people telling everyone how fantastic you are, and you know, you ought to get her on your team. She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. And just on the confidence bit, and to go back to, sorry, I'm going back to a previous point. One of the ways that I ended up doing what I did in the airline industry is I joined through a route that I knew well, which was finance. So I got in through the door doing finance. I had no idea what went on in an airline. I just joined to do what I knew. I had no idea, and I suspect that if you say to somebody, you know, would you like a career in motorsport or Formula One? Apart from seeing the drivers, probably most people have got no clue what would happen in this building. No clue. And yet there's probably hundreds of different options for people to work in. So I would say as well, you know, just try and get people through the door, and then once they're here, give them the confidence to try different things, because you might see a career path that you didn't even imagine existed before, and suddenly think, ooh, I really fancy that. And then if you've got the confidence, you can step up, and to your point, I'd like to have a go at that, please. So, sorry, that's my two questions.
I think just a final point, your point about confidence, does it come from within or can you learn it type of thing? I agree. I think most of it does start with your own levels of confidence, but it comes about being comfortable. Again, you're comfortable with finance, so go there and in. When you are uncomfortable, if I draw on Sid's example of dining alone, lean on others to help expand that comfort zone. So, fine, I'll meet you down at 7 o'clock for dinner, you go down at 6:30. So you know you only got to do this for, say, half an hour until you're more comfortable, etc. You don't have to try and beat yourself up or put yourself under pressure to go and address that. Again, doing things with people. If you've got a supportive team or supportive manager, you know, if there's a situation, a presentation that you need to lead, then agree that how you can do some handoffs, or let them know if, you know, when to kick in if you're perhaps asked a question which you don't really know about. But that's ways of maybe expanding your comfort zone, and with that, your confidence will grow.
And in her book, Deborah talks about being bold and being brave. So I think if you can be bold and brave, confidence grows. Any other questions?
I've been in an interview,
an interview in the past and I got called arrogant, and it really threw me back. And there were 2 people sitting in the interview. One person called me arrogant. Then when she left, I was left in the room with the man, and he said, I don't think you're arrogant, I think you're just confident. And it really took something out of me by someone calling me arrogant in an interview. At that point we were going through my CV. But I just, has anyone ever sort of called, said anything that's made you take a step back and go, oh my God, am I too much?
There was a study done in America, and a woman who was a very successful engineer's CV, her name was Heidi, and the experiment was done at one of the big business schools, and they took her name off it and gave a group of people the CV saying that she was a man, so Harold. So they gave the 2 sets of CVs to these different groups and asked them what they thought about the person that was being interviewed. And she was very ambitious and she was very successful. And when they looked at the CV, when they looked at the woman, her as Heidi, they said, oh, she's coming across as being quite arrogant, quite very confident, a bit overconfident, and didn't really like her as an individual by reading what this person had done. When they asked the same group that had given the CV as Harold, oh no, he's really successful, he's amazing, he's got, he's going to go far. It was the same person. So I think there is perception sometimes that can sometimes put women in that position. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Well, what I would say is I think that's an awful experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brutal is the word.
Yeah. Brutal,
yeah. Absolutely brutal.
I think you've got to try and let that go, because the fault is on the person that said that, quite frankly. And all I would say, if anybody was to ever say something to me about, if they were to say that, I'd say, well, could you give me a clear example of that, please? And just make sure that you can distill it down to perhaps a tiny little learning thing. Yeah. But to say that in any business but in an interview, is so you've got to let that go, because that person had a problem. And it's a shame it was a woman.
Yeah, that's sad. Well, that's what threw me.
Yeah.
I was going to think that maybe they felt intimidated, and you've obviously got a really strong CV. If you said that's what the screening, that's where the process was. But even so, utterly unacceptable behaviour. And I think asking a question back is a really good way, because then it deflects it back on them and it gives you time to just breathe and think. So always, if you're ever in a situation where you feel wrong-footed or a bit back-footed, respond with a question.
That's good advice, Claire. Any other questions here? Oh, 2 more, go on.
Mine kind of builds on from what you've said, actually. So I guess a question to you guys, but following on, how did you feel about when that person left? Then he spoke up, and what would you guys say to kind of your male counterparts about not speaking up in the moment? Do you think more could be done in that situation rather than someone leaving and then saying, oh, I think that wasn't quite right? Because that would have bothered me as well.
So you mean he should have said that when she was... Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yes.
And I think we're not going to get anywhere as a group of females unless we've got males that will back us up. We need allies.
Listening, would you have any advice, to say you have to back us up? How would you approach that, I guess?
Yeah, I think if that was, I'd like to think that I would have given my colleague, my peer, a bit of an inquisitive look and suggested he may want to rephrase that question and deal with it externally, so to speak. But yeah, I think everybody would just been so shocked had that happened. It's hard to think of how you would react, and absolutely reassure the candidate. But you're right, it should be called out in the moment, not acceptable.
And I think also remember that interviews are two-way. And you're interviewing that group, that company, to see whether it's going to be the right fit for you. And I would say the obvious answer to that was no, it's not. You're not going to give them the job.
No. Another question over here?
Because you're all females, and we're in such a male industry, do you ever feel you get treated any differently to a male?
Sorry. No, I was going to say, I think When I first started, as I said at the beginning, you know, I've never felt that I'd never felt any different because I never acted any different. And I always used to joke, you know, I never discriminated against my male colleagues. But I know there were a few things where I was so embarrassed. You know, I remember once having to go and give a presentation to about 60 British Airways captains, and I was probably about 24 at the time, and they were probably all in their 50s. And I was trying to explain to them how they needed to save money, which on the basis that most of them spent more time reading the Financial Times than I did, and probably knew more about finance, it was always going to be a hard one. And anyway, so I got up, I did the presentation, it went okay, and then I sat down, and it just happened to be the 14th of February. And I was the only female in that whole room. So there was the senior leadership team, me sitting on the end, all these 60 captains. And at the end, the guy who'd invited me to come along, the director, said, we can't, you know, it's the 14th of February, so we're going to give you a red rose. And I wanted the ground to swallow me up. I'd just done this bang-on presentation about everything, and then I just suddenly felt like, oh my God, I'm now the woman in the room that's been given a rose. And I kind of smiled, sat down, and then afterwards I said, look, I'm really sorry, but I just need to say to you, you embarrassed me. You embarrassed me because I was there as a professional. And to be fair, he was mortified. And he said, well, I did it with the right intention. But that was a long time ago. I don't think I've really encountered much over the last X many years. And maybe I'm much more confident now, and I would call it out right at that moment if something like that happened. Although I'd quite like to get a nice red rose now. But anyway, that's beside the point. But, you know, I'd probably call it out, and that is the confidence.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I think, yeah, calling it out when it happens. I mean, we've all had experiences when something's maybe not been appropriate, but you've got to nip it in the bud, because then they know it's not appropriate and they won't ever try it again, or they won't do it again. So I think if you've got the confidence to nip it in the bud and say not appropriate, it sort of sets those boundaries straight away. Don't let them get away with it, would be my way.
I think that I don't, again, when I first started, I, like you, was completely oblivious to the fact that I was the only female really within the kind of karting paddock, or that maybe there was one or two more out of the whole scene in the UK. I was just a kid doing what I loved doing, but it was only really, I guess, when I became early teens did I realise that I'm different. And I don't think, obviously it's very difficult to actually know, but I don't think that my gender's ever held me back in opportunities. I think there have been other factors along the way, but what I do think potentially is that it was more difficult to be taken seriously, almost to the way that, because I had a great karting CV, in the sense that, oh, it's okay, like she's a female, females just aren't going to make it. But one thing that I will say is I do think that that is changing, because especially in the driving, everyone's looking for a female to make it to Formula 1, and everyone's looking for the female that they can take to Formula 1, and that wasn't there when I was first started. So it's definitely changing, and I'm sure that there is change in a positive way, even if very small, in your areas as well. But yeah, I almost feel like yeah, it was more difficult to be taken seriously, but I don't think that my gender ever stopped me getting opportunities. Only if I was, if they were looking for a male stunt driver to double a man, I probably wouldn't be able to double Vin Diesel or something like that. So,
excellent. Okay, one more question. I think we've got time for one more. Heath.
I always reflect in my career. There's three people in my career that people I've worked for and respected that give me simple bits of advice, and it sticks with me. I've never forgotten them, and it served me well. You're incredibly successful at what you do. What bits of advice with each one of you, including you, Debbie, because you're highly successful and do a fantastic job. What advice would you give here, sort of wrap it up in a sentence or two, that everyone should remember and go away with?
follow your gut and your heart, and never ever give up. Just keep following your dream. If you get knocked down 7 times, you stand up 8, right? That's fall down 7, stand up 8. That's what I go by.
I'd go with don't be afraid to ask. My career's been built on the idea of asking for more or asking for an opportunity, so don't be afraid to ask.
Keep learning and trying new things, and never stop.
I think if you get offered an opportunity, take it. If it's whether it's travel, it's tickets, just do it, because when are you ever going to get that experience again? And from a professional perspective, if you're offered an opportunity and again you're thinking, have I really got all the skills, can I do it? Somebody has seen something in you that they believe in. They're not going to offer you a role only for you to fail. So grab that opportunity with both hands.
I think for me it will be something that my father always says to me, life's not a dress rehearsal. So just do what you've got to do, but own your career. No one else is going to get you to where you want to get to, so own it. And if you own it, you'll get where you need to get to.